All right, welcome in everyone. Tony Patelis, the host of the College Hoop News podcast. This is episode number 9 and the final preview since we have the season starting tomorrow. So we're going to do mid-majors tonight. We're going to break down every league as quickly as possible. We're kind of on a time deadline tonight, but we'll give you as much content as we can. I had to bring in, obviously, the mid-major encyclopedia, Kevin Sweeney from CBBCentral.com. He's the guy to go to, obviously, on social media if you have any needs for mid-major basketball. So, Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Tony. I think encyclopedia should be my new Twitter bio. I appreciate that one.
It absolutely should be, because anything I ask you, you know. So, all right, so we're going to get right into it tonight, guys. We unfortunately don't have enough time to do team-by-team breakdowns, but we'll give you our, Kevin's going to give you the outline on every league and, who he likes and give us as enough information as possible. So we're going to go in alphabetical order. So obviously we're going to start with the America East tonight. Vermont pretty much runs away with the league last year, Kevin. I think they were 16-0 in conference. But as usual, Albany was there at the end. They almost pulled it out in the conference tournament. That was an excellent game with Albany and Vermont. This season, I still think Vermont is the favorite, but, they do lose some key pieces. Dre Wills was their leader, their best defender. Kurt Steidl was solid for them for a while. I think it'll be a tougher race. I also think a team maybe like UMBC can climb into that picture. What do you think about the America East this year?
I think you pretty much hit it spot on. I think Vermont is still the favorite. They have the best player in the conference in Anthony Lamb, and probably one of the best players in all of mid-major basketball. I mean, a 6'6" forward who can kind of do it all, super efficient, was just incredibly good as a freshman. But yeah, they do lose some guys, some like glue pieces that you miss. You always miss more than the stat sheet shows. And an Albany team that is as consistent as any mid-major in the country. Like Will Brown wins 20 games every year, and he's got David Nichols, and Joe Cremo in the backcourt, who are two tremendous guards. Their front court's going to be solid. So I think so. That'll be a really fun race to watch. I think I am picking Vermont to win the league, but I think both are probably 20+ win teams, and it should be a really fun race overall.
Now, I wanted to ask you about UMBC. They're a team that had some solid success last year. They won 21 games, 9 games in conference. What do you think about the job that Ryan Odom did last year?
Oh, it was an incredible job what Ryan Odom did last year. I doubled their win total and more. The best season in quite a while for UMBC. I think they lose a guy in Darley who is a really solid player, but they do bring back Jarius Lyles, who's an excellent scorer, KJ Maura, who's kind of like a diminutive little point guard at 5'8", but makes a lot of plays. I think they'll probably be in that 18 to 20 win mix, and be a team that could kind of startle someone in the conference tournament as like a 3 or 4 seed and make some noise there.
Right. Do you agree though that it'll be harder on Vermont to win the conference this year?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the conference is a little bit deeper this year than it has been in years past. I think there's some teams like New Hampshire has a really strong front court. Stony Brook's a solid program overall, and I think Jeff Bowles is doing a pretty good job there. Binghamton is a team that I think could make some strides this year. UMass Lowell has one of the most underrated players in mid-major basketball in Jahad Thomas, who averaged 18, 9, and 4 last year. Just an incredible stat line. So I think it's a bit of a deeper league than it's been in years past, and so that'll make it a bit tougher, because that's what made Vermont's road so easy last year. It's just that the depth in the conference beyond Albany, Stony Brook, and UMBC was really easy. I mean, you have basically half of your games off because they're such weak opponents compared to Vermont. And so I think with the depth of that league improving, that'll be something that makes the road a lot harder for Vermont.
All right, and before we move on, Vermont plays Kentucky tomorrow, correct?
No, they play them Sunday.
Sunday, okay. That's going to be a very interesting game. I would not be shocked if Vermont gives them a pretty good game.
I think Vermont will be winning with 10 minutes left. I don't know if they'll win, but I think they'll be winning by 3, and I'll get the ESPN push alert. It's Vermont beating Kentucky by 3, and then we'll see what happens from there once Kentucky wakes up. But I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right, so it should be a fun year in the America East. Vermont is one of the better mid-major teams in the country, and also, like you said, Albany's, always good. Always winning 20 games every year. Will Brown does a great job. All right, so let's move on. Atlantic 10. So this is a league that it's kind of taken a few step backs the past few years. And now the premier program in Dayton also looks to be in kind of transition mode. Many peg URI as the front runner. Do you agree with that? And how many bids do you think this league gets this year? I don't think it gets more than 3.
I think it's a 2-bid league, Tony.
Me too.
VCU's a team that's kind of in transition. I was pretty high on them, but they've struggled this preseason. I think it's going to take time. I don't think I'm going to like throw the panic buttons, but it's certainly if they're going to struggle in the non-conference slate as they kind of get used to a new coach and a new roster, then that will significantly hurt their chances of an at-large bid. But yeah, my pick at the top is Rhode Island. I think they're not as quite a runaway favorite as a lot of people think, just because losing guys like Hassan Martin and Iverson in the front court, just 2 really solid players, 2 rim protectors. So I think that'll hurt them, but they have guards on top of guards. They're going to be a really special team this year to watch.
It's funny. I think even that 2 to 5 range, we don't really know where people are going to finish. I mean, we wouldn't be shocked if VCU finished second. We wouldn't be shocked if St. Bonaventure's finished second. We wouldn't be shocked if St. Joe's did, correct?
Oh yeah, I think there's a ton of teams in the A10 where I'm want to like them, but they're a step away from me. They're missing one piece or 2 pieces, and it's going to depend on what types of guys can step up. Like at St. Bonaventure, if they can find that third scorer and they can find a little extra help in the post, or for St. Joe's, can everybody stay healthy? And then I just think from basically top to bottom, this league is full of question marks, and it should make it really fun to watch. But it's a pretty difficult league to predict at this time.
So both of us have Rhode Island as the top dog, the front runner. In your opinion, who has the best chance, even knowing all these question marks, who has the best chance you think to maybe also win the conference?
If I was picking a number 2 team in the conference, I'd probably pick St. Bonaventure at this point. But I think upside wise, it would be St. Joe's or VCU. Right. I think those are the 2 teams that have the rosters to go out and be really, really strong teams. Obviously, the health is the concern with St. Joe's. Charlie Brown's coming back soon, hopefully. Shavar Newkirk, hopefully coming off that ACL, can be where he needs to be. I think right now, those 2 teams are the ones that have the upside to go beat Rhode Island and be like a really strong team at the top. But I would say right now, if I was picking a second place team, it'd be St. Bonaventure, just because I feel like we know what they are.
Yeah, that's not going to fly with me. So I think St. Bonaventure sucks, but that's just my opinion, and it has no bias
right now.
It has no bias whatsoever in my prediction. All right, so yeah, I mean, Rhode Island seems like the front runner in the A10, and it should be a fun time this year. Because there's so many question marks, we don't know what's going to happen. So, all right, so that's the A10 for tonight. Up next, we're going to talk about the Atlantic Sun. So pretty much when you talk about the A-Sun, it really comes down to Florida Gulf Coast. They've had a tremendous run this last 5 years. They've gone to 3 NCAA tournaments. They've won 3 NCAA tournament games. They've also won 2 regular season titles, and I don't think they've finished lower than second in the last 5 years. Joe Dooley has done a great job with this program. He'll probably be a hot name in the coaching market as well once the season ends. It's certainly a possibility. So to me, and I'm sure you agree, I think it's FGCU's is the heavy favorite, and maybe an experienced Lipscomb team is right on their heels. But other than that, I mean, who is there really?
Yeah, that's the question I'm asking, Tony. I do really like FGCU. I think their front court is a bit inexperienced in terms of playing at Florida Gulf Coast, but there's a lot of talent. There's this high major talent up and down that front court. And the guards that come back, guys like Brandon Goodwin, Zach Johnson, Christian Terrell, that'll be the clear favorite for me. I mean, after Lipscomb, who is just a super high-flying offense, they have a guy in Garrison Matthews who can score with anybody in the country. After them is where the questions lie, as you said. I think North Florida will be kind of in that mix still. I know they lose Dallas Moore, but they have a really solid young duo in Wajid Aminu and Garrett Sams. So those are the 2 guys I'd look for there. If they can blossom into stars to make that next step, that would be the team I think would be hot in pursuit. But like you said, it's very tough.
Right. Florida Gulf Coast has kind of quietly become one of the top schools when it comes to transfers. They brought in a ton of talent by the transfer market the last few years, and that's why I think they've won the league and been so so consistent. What about a team like Stetson? To me, they might be that. Could they be also be a sleeper team in this conference?
Obviously, Divine Miles is an excellent guard, probably one of the better guards in the conference. But to me, the loss of Derek Newton he went pro early after his sophomore year, after averaging, I think, 16 points and 7 rebounds a game. That's a huge blow. I actually would have probably had them third or fourth if not for that, but I still think they'll be towards the bottom of the conference, losing a guy like Newton, who is such a stalwart in the front court.
Right. And Lipscomb is a super talented team offensively. How much of a shot would you give them to knock off Florida Gulf Coast?
In the regular season, it's not very high that they would actually surpass Florida Gulf Coast and win a regular season title. But I wouldn't want to face them in March. I think they had something like 16 threes in a game last year in the conference tournament, in one of the conference tournament games. So they go out there, they shoot the lights out. They're a really explosive offense. They have really good guards who make plays. And when you have that type of firepower, that's not what you want to face in a one game playoff type of situation. And when you're Florida Gulf Coast, I mean, they've scheduled tough in the non-conference, but the A-Sun is a weak league overall, and they're probably not a team that I would see getting an at-large bid. So that'll be a really fun conference tournament to watch. Campus site tournament, which is good. So it'll be at Alico Arena, probably for a potential conference championship game between Florida Gulf Coast and Lipscomb.
All right, that sounds pretty good. I'm excited about Florida Gulf Coast. I love their non-conference schedule, so I think we definitely have to keep an eye on them early in the season. So next, let's talk about the Big Sky. This is a league I'm very excited about, and the thing I love is I don't think there is a clear favorite. I think Idaho is a team that's going to be in that mix. Montana, North Dakota, Weber State. This is a really deep league, and I also think maybe Montana State could possibly make some noise. I love the depth of the conference, and it really has a ton of talent. I think the talent is very underrated. You have Tyler Hall, Ahmad Rory, Victor Sanders, Gino Crandall, Bogdan Bliznik. I mean, the list goes on. What's your thoughts on the league, and how do you think it plays out?
I think the first thing that comes to mind with the Big Sky is the star power you mentioned. They've had some really talented stars in the past, even going back to like Damian Lillard, but Joel Bollenboy, some really talented players through Weber State, Tyler Harvey at Eastern Washington a couple years back. But this year there's just a lot of really talented players at the top of some of these rosters. I'm really excited to see how it pans out. My pick is probably still Montana to win the conference. They do lose Donovan Dorsey with a hip injury, the transfer from Washington, which is a bit of a blow. But I really like Ahmad Rory, the former Oregon transfer who averaged, I think, 17 points a game last year. Really talented kid. Looking up and down, I think Northern Colorado is a team that could really surprise. I've heard some good things about them and especially their guards. I talk about Andre Spite, a transfer from Arizona State, Jordan Davis, who kind of made headlines this summer for playing with the Azerbaijan national team, even though he has no connection to Azerbaijan until now. They have some really talented pieces, and I'm excited about them as well, possibly making some noise in the Big Sky.
Yeah, I had them down as my sleeper team. We actually talked about it the other night about that backcourt. Spite, Johnson and Davis. Davis is a kid I didn't mention all that star power I mentioned in the intro. I wanted to ask you about Brecken Chapman too at Weber State. He's a kid, former top 100 kid who it didn't work out at Utah for him. What type of impact do you think he makes in this league?
I think he makes a massive impact. I'm not sure how I would project stats, but I think he's definitely a starter, probably an all Big Sky level player. At 6'9", to be able to do what he does on the basketball court, kind of shoot the three, handle the ball, also go down low, score in the high post, do a lot of different things for them. I think the year off probably really helped him. I think he got really good coaching from Randy Ray. And I know Weber State is really high on what he can do and kind of step in and be a super important contributor for a team that hopes to go win another Big Sky title.
Absolutely. I'm with you too. I have Montana as the favorite, and talk about a tremendous conference tournament, with all those really good teams at the top.
Oh yeah, it should be super fun. I don't think it's one of those conferences that will never get the recognition in terms of like during the season because it's Montana and North Dakota and teams kind of in the middle of nowhere. But this should be a really fun league to watch. I'm actually looking forward to it quite a bit.
Yeah, the handful of guys I mentioned in the intro, I think you could see some of those guys in the NBA possibly.
Absolutely. I think Tyler Hall's a guy who's gotten some discussion as an NBA prospect. Victor Sanders, I think it would depend on how he measures out, but I mean, there's a place for 45% from three in the NBA, and that's what Victor Sanders shot last year. So he's another guy who could be there. But yeah, I just think there definitely is some really top end talent in this conference that should be super fun.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on, Kevin. We're going to talk about the Big South next. Unfortunately, it's been one of those mid-major leagues that's kind of been hit hard by transfers the past few years. But it's somewhat of been a balanced league as well. I think 5 different teams have won the conference tournament the last 9 years. It's a very competitive league. I think 8 teams last year won 7+ conference games. Looks to me like UNC Asheville's the front runner. Ahmad Thomas is one of the best kept secrets in college basketball. We've talked about him a lot. But I don't think it'll be easy for them. Liberty looks like a solid team. High Point, Winthrop looks to be okay this year. How do you think things shake out in the Big South?
Yeah, I agree that UNC Asheville is the favorite. You have to love that backcourt. Maceo Teague and Ahmad Thomas, 2 of the better guards in college basketball, teaming up there. Their front court is a little thin, which is a concern of mine. But yeah, I think Liberty as well is a team that could win 20 games. Winthrop's been a really strong program under Pat Kelsey. He comes back after his brief vacation to UMass and brings back Xavier Cooks, who is such a versatile player at 6'9" to be able to shoot the three, take you off the bounce with guard skills really at 6'9". And then a team I think you didn't mention in Campbell who did make a run late last season. Chris Clemens is absolutely one of the most exciting players to watch in college basketball. And I'm on the record saying they will beat Penn State tomorrow afternoon at a absolutely packed Bryce Jordan. It's such a tough.
There'll probably be 400 people there probably.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's an afternoon game, I think, which actually helps Campbell just because it'll be a kind of a sleepy start and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I actually am on record. I think Campbell will beat Penn State tomorrow afternoon to start the season. I think that'll be fun. Chris Clemens is going to go for 40.
Clemens is the returning scorer in college basketball, correct?
Yeah, him and Dahlm are tied. Him and Dahlm are tied.
25 a game, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Even with Clemens, are they strong enough, do you think, to win the league, though? A team like that?
Campbell? I'm sorry. I think there's a bit of a connection issue right now. You're
hear me okay?
Out.
Hold on 1 second. Mine's perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah. It's just it's a little. I can understand you though. It's just a little bit gravelly, but I got you. So Campbell, do they have enough to win the league? I don't think they have enough to win the league in the regular season. Chris Clemens is excellent, as I mentioned before. And I think a guy that people looked over is Mo Galato, who can protect the rim as a big guy for them. But overall, I don't think they have enough. I just don't think that team has enough talent. I mean, as much as last year's late season run was exciting, this was a team that was not very good for much of the season. So I don't think we can go as far as say they're a title contender per se against the UNC Asheville or a Liberty, but definitely a team to watch and a team that'll be tough to beat in March with a guy like Chris Clemens, as we saw last year against UNC Asheville.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Big West next. This is a league that kind of is a dumpster fire. I legit can't tell you who's going to win the conference this season. I've seen numerous polls and they kind of all look different. This was a league I really enjoyed a handful of years ago, but the last few years it's been kind of rough. I think I'm going with Long Beach State. How do you think it plays out?
It's going to be a really tough league to figure out this year. I think Long Beach State is a team to watch, even though according to a couple of tweeters, Dan Monson is the worst head coach in the Big West. Oh God, don't get me started on that one. But Long Beach State, I mean, they bring in Brian Albers from Gonzaga, the type of experience you want. 6'5" guard, can shoot the three, defend. everything kind of you want in a grad transfer. So I think he'll step in, play a big role right away. Gabe Levin, I think, gets kind of freed up. Last year, there was just so much chemistry issue, I thought. I think their chemistry was really bad. Evan Payne wanted the ball in his hands. Justin Bibbins wanted the ball in his hands. Gabe Levin wanted the ball in his hands. There was Rashawn Prince was in there at the mix as well. I think by virtue of those transfers, they almost solved their chemistry issue because now they have a clear star in Gabe Levin. They have a guy in Temediah Yusuf who is a very solid big man who can do a lot of different things in terms of the dirty work and getting on the glass. And then they bring in some talented newcomers at guard. Deshaun Booker's a JUCO guy I like a lot. Edon Maxuni's a freshman I've heard some good things about. So they're my pick to win it. But it's a really tough lead to call. I mean, I'd actually love to hear who you like there because as you said, there are so many different ways you can go with it.
Yeah, I went with Long Beach State as well. But I think Hawaii is a team that, they returned 5 of their top 6 scorers from last season. And they also returned Mike Thomas, who missed last year with a wrist injury. He's a double-digit scorer. So I think Long Beach State and Hawaii will be at the top. And I think maybe, UC Irvine and UC Davis, that would probably be my top 4. But there's just so many question marks. I really can't give you a great answer. And, that's what pretty much everybody says. You just don't know.
Yeah, Hawaii's got some good bigs. I really like Gibson Johnson. Michael Thomas comes back after redshirting last year, and then Jack Purchase. But I think it's all about their guard play. What can they get out of guys like Leland Green as a sophomore, Samuda Avea, the talented freshman, #1 player in the state of Hawaii. So that'll be an interesting team to watch. I think I picked them either 4th or 5th, so not quite as high as you. But I like Aron Gennad as a coach. I think he's done a really good job there. And last year they were dealing with the NCAA investigation, whether they were going to be eligible for the postseason or not. They finally did win that appeal, and it did get that postseason ban lifted. So I think that was kind of a difficult thing for them. They were short on scholarships. So I think this year getting back to that and then the year after as well will be a good chance for them to, rebuild as a program because that is one of the better programs in the Big West.
Absolutely. But it's really wide open this year. I mean, I think a lot of people are picking Irvine kind of just by default because they don't know who else to pick. But Irvine loses a ton of production from last year's team.
Yeah. I mean, they're young. They have they have a really strong sophomore class. And I think Russell Turner's a really good coach. And so I think he gets the benefit of the doubt as well. But yeah, I'm not quite as high on their roster as a lot of people are.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about the CAA next. So this is another league I'm really excited about. UNC Wilmington has really dominated this league the last few years, but, they lose their coach. They also lose a ton of production. So now it looks like, College Charleston will be the top dog in that conference. They have one of the better duos in college basketball in Joe Chaley and Jerome Brantley. They came in second last year behind UNC Wilmington. I think they finished 25-10, 14-4 in conference. Does Charleston run away with the CAA this year, or can maybe a team like Towson, or Elon creep up and steal it?
I think College of Charleston runs away with this one. They're talented. They have that perfect mix as a mid-major of talent and experience. They bring back pretty much everybody from that team last year that was so talented and won 25 games. I mean, that team was excellent. Most years, that team would have been an NCAA tournament team and a team that most people were like, oh, that's a team I would want to pick in my bracket. But just the strength of UNC Wilmington kind of overshadowed them all year. But that was a tremendous team. They bring back so much production. Jarrell Brantley, Joe Chaley. I mean, Joe Chaley was coming off an injury and averaged like 17, 4, and 3. He had missed the entire previous season due to an injury. I mean, that dude is a special guard. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them. I don't think there's a team quite at their level in the conference. So that's my early pick. Although I will say I've been really impressed with Towson this preseason. Even going back to August on their Canada trip, they beat Carleton, which like nobody beat Carleton on Canada trips. And then they beat Bucknell in a charity game. I mean, they seem like, I don't want to overact all these things, but when you're winning all of these games, it makes me feel like, this is a team that could have a really strong season. So I'm really interested to see how Towson does. That's kind of the team that I'm looking at as an X factor in the conference.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about Hofstra. I know this was a team that really struggled defensively last year, but they returned a really solid trio. Justin Ray Foreman, Rokas Gusty, is a really talented big. Eli Henderson as well. Do you think they can make any noise in conference this year?
Yeah, I've highlighted them as a dark horse. I think they have the offensive pieces. I think their offense needs to be a bit more efficient and run through. I think Duron Powers was the point guard last season, and he was more of a combo guard scorer. I think bringing in Kenny Wormley, a JUCO transfer by way of Siena, so I'm pretty familiar with him, is a guy who's 6'4", he's super athletic. I think he's a guy who could improve their defense, and also he's very much a pass-first player. He's not attempting to go score 20 points. So having him next to a Justin Wright Foreman, who is a bit undersized at the two-guard position, but is going to go score like crazy and want the ball in his hands, I think that's kind of a natural fit. So I'm excited. It's kind of reminiscent to how Siena looked 2 years ago, where they played Wormley next to Marquise Wright, who's 6 feet tall and was experimenting off the ball a little bit. So I think that'll be a very interesting look. I think Wormley's a guy who's going to have a really solid year if they're going to have a good season overall.
Does College of Charleston have a good enough non-conference where if they blew through the league, they could possibly be an at-large team?
No, I don't think so. I think they have Siena to open the year, and then they have Wichita State. Both of those teams are Wichita State would be the chance. If you beat Wichita State, then maybe you have a somewhat of a chance if you went like 28-4. But their schedule overall is, I think, pretty weak, actually, looking at it. They have Wichita State, then they have at Charlotte, who should be pretty decent. But then they go to the Great Alaska Shootout, and they'll play such powerhouses such as Cal Poly, Central Michigan, and Sam Houston State. Then they have Western Carolina, High Point, South Carolina State. They actually have a trip to Rhode Island as well. So I think maybe if they beat, say, Wichita State and Rhode Island and went like 28-4 overall, then maybe they'd have a shot. It's just so tough. I mean, I try to be realistic with these mid-major at-large bids. I'd love to see them, but I think sometimes people get the sense, if they can just win one game, but get one big win, they can be in an at-large discussion. And I think it's going to be tough. They don't have a ton of quality games. You need to have consistently high-level teams on your schedule to get an at-large bid. You need to have like a ton of really good mid-majors on your schedule if you're a mid-major team, and I just don't think they have that in the non-conference.
Yeah. For instance, I think Florida Gulf Coast has a schedule they could possibly do, but if they win.
Yeah, if you flop Florida Gulf Coast non-conference with College of Charleston, then I'd feel a lot better about saying they're an at-large potential team because the CAA is not as weak as the ASUN.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to move on here. We're going to talk about Conference USA next. This might be the mid-major conference I'm most excited about. They're just so stacked at the top. UAB, Middle Tennessee State, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech. I also think you could maybe even put UTEP or ODU in that mix as well. To me, UAB should be the favorite now, especially with Nick Norton back healthy. They really missed him last year. They led the conference in turnover margin because, he just wasn't in the mix. They didn't have a point guard. So how do you feel about this conference? I'm really excited about it.
I echo that completely, Tony. I'm super excited to watch the CUSA this year. UAB is my favorite as well. I'm very excited to watch Zach Bryant, the freshman. I was told by a guy inside the UAB program that Zach Bryant would be the best freshman in the conference sans Mitchell Robinson. This was before Mitchell Robinson left. And so I'm really excited to watch him play. He's super athletic, defends really well, another playmaker with the ball in his hands, which I think is so useful next to a guy like Norton, who's such a steady distributor. But having another guy who wants the ball in their hands and can create, especially with two bigs like Chris Coakley and William Lee. That's an exciting team. Middle Tennessee State will still be there. Nick King, I've heard really good things about this offseason as that small ball four that they'll use, kind of the way they used Reggie Upshaw. So I'm really excited about that team. Western Kentucky's look good in their preseason games. Kind of the question mark here is, will they have enough depth? And that'll kind of come down to whenever the NCAA decides to make a ruling on Josh Anderson and Mustafa Diagne. It's not like the games are in 24 hours or anything. So that'll be interesting. And then I wanted to ask you about Louisiana Tech, because that's an interesting team to me. What are your thoughts on that?
I love Louisiana Tech. I think Jacoby Boykins is obviously one of the better players in the conference. He's a first-teamer type guy. And then, my favorite point guard in college basketball possibly is Daquan Bracey. He averaged 9 points a game last year, almost 6 assists, and I think he has like a 3.5 turnover ratio, assist-to-turnover ratio, which is absolutely ridiculous. They have some solid pieces. I think they might have a little bit of a depth issue. I don't know if they have a ton of size up front, but I think those guys at the top are good enough to keep them possibly in the top 4. They're one of the better programs in Conference USA. I mean, they win 20, 25, 20, 23 games every year. That's been a really good program. Mike White did a great job. Now Conkle's doing, just has kept it going. So I really like Louisiana Tech. The thing I wanted to ask you too was Western Kentucky. How different of a team is this now without Mitchell Robinson, and not just Robinson, but Jordan Branders?
I think I was actually looking at the roster quite a bit. I think in terms of the style, they're a lot different because they were going to be a team that relied on playing through the paint. Justin Johnson, Mitchell Robinson, Dwight Colby, they had a lot of depth in the front court. And all of a sudden, it just kind of dissipated, especially now that Diagne's eligibility is in question. They pretty much have Justin Johnson and Dwight Colby, and that is it in the front court. So this is a guard-oriented team. The one thing I'm not as concerned about, a lot of people did how's the chemistry? How are the pieces going to fit together when Robinson and Brengers and all those new guys? I actually don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. Lamonte Bearden's kind of a true point guard. I don't know if he's healthy yet, but he's getting there for sure. He's going to create in the open floor. Darius Thompson's been super impressive. He's going to do a little bit of everything for them, hit some shots, create off the bounce. Tavion Hollingsworth is a freshman who got named a captain. That's almost unheard of, Mr. Basketball in the state of Kentucky. So I think that they're going to be relying on their guards. They're going to have no depth unless Josh Anderson gets back. But they're a team, I think they're going to be really good. I'm going to go out there and say they're going to win like 22, 23 games. I think they're going to have an excellent season.
Okay, and can you hear me okay now, Kevin?
What was that?
Can you hear me okay still, or is it still an issue?
It's still gravelly, but I can understand what you're saying, yeah.
Okay. UTEP is a team that, they pick up Keith Frazier, which is huge, and I already thought they might be a sleeper team. Omega Harris is really good. Paul Thomas is an up-and-comer. Do you think they could possibly make some noise?
Yeah, I mean, I love their backcourt with Keith Frazier and Omega Harris. I think my one concern with them is just point guard play, because I think both of those, both Harris and Frazier are more scorers and creators. And I think one guy who could really do that is Evan Gilliard. He's a freshman from the Chicago area, went to Simeon, which is one of the big, well-known programs in the Chicago area. He's really tough, likes to get to the rim, had some pretty interesting offers from some Missouri Valley schools, a couple A-10 schools. So a nice get for sure for Tim Floyd, and I think a guy who's going to get a lot of minutes from the start and contribute in a big way.
All right, and you have UAB as winning that conference, you said?
I did, yes. UAB, then Middle Tennessee, then Western Kentucky, then Louisiana Tech, and then all hell breaks loose.
All right, so let's talk about the Horizon next. So kind of the bad news in the Horizon, they lost one of their better programs in Valparaiso. The good news, though, is Oakland looks like a very, very dangerous team. If they get it to March, they could be possibly one of these teams that, knocks off, a team in the first round, maybe, advance to the Sweet 16. But, the top of the conference is pretty interesting. Northern Kentucky, I think, will be in the mix along with UIC. Steve McLean's done a good job building that program. But it seems to me that Oakland is the runaway favorite in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, adding a guy like Kendrick Nunn is just, how often can a mid-major team add a legitimate all-conference player at a Big Ten school? And that's what Kendrick Nunn was. If it weren't for the firepower that Martez Walker and Jalen Hayes bring to the table, I'd say Kendrick Nunn would lead the country in scoring. He's just absolutely absurdly good. I think he's an NBA potential guy. And they just have so much talent. But yeah, as you mentioned, there's some teams out there. UIC is a team that has a lot of talent. Dikembe Dixon comes back from an ACL, who's a super talented wing. Ty Odias is a guy who protects the rim at an elite level and is super strong, be a nice player in the post. Tarkus Ferguson was only like, there was like, I forget how many players, but it was a very small number of players who averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, and that's pretty much what he averaged last season. So another interesting team to watch there. And then I think a sleeper that some people aren't really talking about is Youngstown State. Cameron Morse is back. Santiago's back as well. And then a new coach with a new system in Jared Calhoun. They're really excited about him, and they're really excited about the direction of that program.
Yeah, and Detroit brings in some JUCO guys this year, and also Cam Chapman from Michigan. So I think they're a team that could possibly creep up into that top 4, possibly.
Absolutely, yeah. I like Detroit a lot. Jaleel Hogan kind of contemplated a transfer this offseason, was going to head to UAB, but had some issues and had to stay at Detroit. They're lucky he did. A very talented kid, at average like 15 points and 6 rebounds a game in limited minutes due to foul trouble. Super talented kid. Corey Allen comes back, who had an excellent freshman season as well. And then as you mentioned, Chapman. So I think that's a team that could make some noise as well. I think the Horizon League. I mean, I don't want to get into this too much because this is an argument we could have for 20 minutes, but I think there's a very strong chance that the Horizon League is better than the Missouri Valley this year.
I absolutely agree with you. I don't think the Missouri Valley. We'll get to that later, but I don't think it's very good this year. The scary thing about Oakland is I didn't think if they didn't have Kendrick Nunn on this roster, they'd probably be the favorite. Do you agree with that?
If they didn't have Kendrick Nunn, they'd still be the favorite? Yeah, I think so. I think Northern Kentucky would have an argument, and so would UIC, but I think most people would be on the Oakland bandwagon without Kendrick Nunn.
That's the scary thing. Because
oh my God. They're gonna be all kinds of good. If I was worried the pieces wouldn't come together, but what I'm hearing is that they're smooth and everything's gonna be great, and they're a well-oiled machine, and this team is gonna be like, I mean, they have top 25 talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're gonna be excellent.
I can't wait to watch them this year. All right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about the Ivy League next. Finally goes to a conference tournament next year. They're probably telling themselves, why don't we do this sooner? I know, granted, I think only 4 teams gain access to the tournament, but, that makes the regular season very important. To me, it looks like Harvard and Yale might overtake Princeton this year as one of the top teams. I know I think you like Yale a little bit better than Harvard, but would that be your top 3 possibly going into the season?
Yeah, I would have Yale number 1, Harvard number 2, and Princeton number 3. I think Yale getting Makai Mason back. I mean, Makai Mason was a guy who averaged 16 points a game, scored 30 on Baylor in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. I mean, he was the Ivy League Player of the Year probably going into last year, as he was the preseason favorite. And then they lose him and to still win 18, 19 games, go to the Ivy League tournament as a top 3 team in the conference. And bring back what they bring back in terms of Mie Oni, who a lot of guys have called an NBA prospect, Jordan Brunner, who's super athletic at 6'8" and blocks a ton of shots for them. That's going to be a really interesting team at Yale. I think that's my pick. And then I think Princeton's a team. Harvard's super young last year, 4 freshmen starting basically, and to be as good as they were was super impressive. Tommy Amaker does a great job. But I think people are kind of forgetting, because of Yale and Harvard being so good, is what Princeton is still bringing back. Miles Stevens was excellent last season. I've kind of developed a bit of a love affair with the guy because of just how good he is. I'm the only Miles Stevens lover on Twitter, but go Miles Stevens. And he's out there. They have Devin Kennedy, who's kind of a fearless shot maker. I think they're going to win 22 games again. Mitch Henderson does a great job there. And so Princeton's a team to me that I think it's 1A, 1B, and 1C. It's not 1A, 1B, and then 3.
Yeah, I think the talent in this league gets a little bit overlooked. I mean, the recruiting job that Tommy Andrews done since being at Harvard, and James Jones has brought in a lot of really talented kids at Yale. I think it gets a little overlooked. I mean, there's some really, really good players in this league.
Oh, the recruiting's been tremendous. Princeton's doing a great job as well recruiting. 2018, they actually have a 4-star point guard coming in. But yeah, I think teams at high academic schools right now are doing a really good job of recruiting, whether it's at the Ivy level, whether it's at a place like Stanford with what Jared Haas is doing, with what Chris Collins is doing at Northwestern. These teams are – I had to drop Northwestern in there, even in a mid-major podcast. But I think they're doing – I think these high academic schools are finding a way to get kids to embrace getting that whole 40 years, not 4 years, that sentiment that so many high academic schools use when they're trying to recruit. And I think it's definitely shown out in the Ivy League.
Absolutely. So I would probably add Penn into my top 4. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, I would have Penn number 4. I think AJ Bruder is a really talented kid, and they'll have the Ivy League tournament on their home floor. And I was seeing simulations that had Penn as still the favorite to win the Ivy League in the Ivy League tournament with the games on their home floor. That's how good Penn is, and people just forget that they're just a forgotten about team because of how good that top 3 is. But having that home court advantage should make it a really interesting time.
Absolutely. All right. So, Kevin, here we are. We're going to talk about the MAC. Kevin is the guy when it comes to MAC hoops. The unfortunate thing is I think we both agree the league is going to be very good this season. Iona looks to be the clear-cut favorite, with a slew of question marks behind them. The great thing about the league is the conference tourney. It's very unpredictable. I think the number 1 seed has only won 15 out of 36 years that the conference has been around.
It's the longest streak in college basketball currently. It hasn't been won by the top seed since those Siena teams in the 08, 09, 2010 range. It's been a pretty wild one.
All right, so how do you think the league plays out this year?
God, I thought I had a pretty good sense of how the MAC was going to do, and then I watched preseason exhibitions from everyone, and I'm more concerned than ever. I thought Iona was going to be really good. I still think they'll be pretty good, but they haven't exactly inspired confidence early. And I think Tim Cluse does a great job, and he'll have them ready in March. But I don't think they're going to run away with the league like some people think. Manhattan got demolished by Princeton in a secret scrimmage and then got beat by Sacred Heart pretty comfortably. Siena lost to a D2. Fairfield lost to a D2. Niagara lost to Robert Morris, who isn't picked very highly in the conference. So in the NEC, I should say. So that's a conference that I'm just really not sure about. Manhattan's super talented, but their point guard in Xavier Turner turns it over a lot, which is a bit of a concern for me personally. I think they're the team, if you're looking at ranking talent, they'd be the number 2 roster behind Iona. Number 3, I think Monmouth's still in the mix there. I know they lose a ton. Micah Seaborn has to be a lot more efficient as a scorer than he's been. Last season at 30, he shot 37% from the field, which probably won't cut it this year as the guy. So I think Monmouth's a team. They have some pieces that are interesting. Overall, just a really tough league to call. Kind of like the Big West, except I just don't think the talent is as bad. It's just that we just don't know. There's so many new faces. There's so many inexperienced teams that should make it tough.
Yeah, you mentioned Niagara. They returned Matt Scott, Khalil Dukes, Marvin Brochet, Don Robb. They have a really good top 4 there. Could you see them creeping up into that top 4 possibly?
I definitely think it's a possibility. I actually picked them 4th, I believe, in the conference. Scott is great, as you said. Dukes is tremendous. My question, they just don't have a winning culture, and I know it sounds kind of like a Wisconsin fan right now, but Chris Casey hasn't won anything since they got there. This was a 10-win team last year. Why are they supposed to is the MAC that much worse that Niagara? I don't necessarily see a piece incoming that makes them that much better. So is the MAC that much worse than just being the same team and maybe winning 2 or 3 more games by maybe being 2 games better than last season, but the league gets worse and you climb 5 spots? I hope not, because that means the MAC is really bad. We'll see. I think they do have 2 of the top 7 or 8 players in the conference, so they'll be right there. But that just wasn't a great team last year, and that is a concern for me. You have to win games.
Speaking of a winning tradition, Tim Cluse and this Iona staff have done such a tremendous job with this program. They use every avenue possible. They go JUCO, they go high school transfers. It's so impressive. Talk a little bit before we move on about the job that Iona has done in the last few years and Tim Cluse, the coach.
I mean, Iona's just it's a machine of a program at this point, and as you say, they use every possible avenue. I mean, they have kids on their roster from pretty much everywhere, junior college, international, typical transfers, prep school kids. I love their point guard, Ricky McGill. He's super tough, makes plays, defends, everything you want in a point guard. They bring in a grad transfer in Zach Lewis, who's going to score for them on the wing. TK Adogi is going to have a ton of pressure on him in the front court to hold down the fort there, if you will. I do think they're going to take a few lumps early. They struggled against Army in a charity exhibition. I've heard they didn't play very well at all against St. Francis of Brooklyn in a secret scrimmage. Although I try not to take too much from a secret scrimmage because you don't know what teams are doing there. So I'm a little. I think Iona's going to be fine because they always are fine and they always win 20 games. And I mean the talent is obviously there. They're the most talented roster in the MAC by far, in my opinion. But I do think they'll take some lumps in the non-conference because they do play a pretty tough schedule.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Again, Iowa looks like the front runner but Manhattan, like you said, is super talented, so maybe they could make a push. All right, so unfortunately, we have to talk about the MEAC. Hopefully, we can do it within just 30 seconds or so. What do you think about this league? It looks like Morgan State is the favorite, possibly maybe Hampton, Norfolk State. How do you think it plays out in the MEAC, Kevin?
Yeah, Morgan State's the favorite for me. Tiwion, Kendley, and Phil Carr are probably could be 1-2 in the conference in scoring, and that's pretty scary. The one team I'm gonna kind of mention in that race as well is North Carolina Central. They do lose a ton of talent, but I trust Lavelle Moten as at head coach. I think he's done a really good job bringing in talent as well. Also, kind of like Iona in that they brought in talent from every avenue. They bring in some really good JUCO guys. One JUCO guy I'm going to highlight is Dominique Reed. He began his career at Niagara. I watched him a couple of years back, and he was absolutely a beast. I mean, he was 10-6 big man as a freshman in the MAC. I mean, that's unheard of. And he down the stretch, he was even better. So and then he had some legal trouble, landed at junior college, and Lavelle Moten picks him up. But I think, I mean, if he returns to that level, he's going to be a tremendous player in the MEAC, an all-league level player.
All right, I think that's enough of the MEAC. What do you think?
I'm fine. Yeah, we can move on.
All right, let's talk about the MAC. The thing I noticed right off the bat doing the research was that the West Division actually looks to be stronger than the East, and I don't think that's happened in a long time. Western Michigan and Ball State could be the class in the league. Now, it's not to say the East isn't good. Buffalo's looking strong. Ohio still looks like they're pretty good. But, Akron, who has really been the class of the league for a long time, they don't just lose their coach, but they lose a ton of production as well. So maybe that gives another team a chance to kind of take over. What do you think about the MAC conference this year?
It's very wide open. I don't think there's a team that I would call elite or a clear favorite by any means. I like Buffalo a great deal. They have some really talented pieces: CJ Massenberg, Nick Perkins. They bring in the number 2 junior college player in the nation, which is a really big recruiting pull for Nate Oates, who's done a tremendous job recruiting going forward in 2018 as well. So they're my pick to actually win the league. I like Ball State as well. You mentioned the job that James Whitford has done there has just been tremendous. He's recruited really good talent. He's kept players in Indiana, which is so key in such a talented, rich state. Won 20 games last year. And I think they'll be right in the mix again. They have Trey Moses, who's a really solid big man. Taylor Persons. They bring in a transfer from Incarnate Word in Texas, in John Trell Walker, who averaged over 12 points a game at UIW in the Southland. So they found pretty much guys from everywhere, and they put together a really talented roster. And I think Ball State will be in the mix as well.
And Western Michigan will be in that team as well. Thomas Wilder, he might be the best player in the conference. What do you think about this Western Michigan club?
Oh, I like Thomas Wilder a ton. They have scouts at every practice, NBA scouts. This is a guy who they are very high on in terms of pro circles. I think they're kind of one piece away from contending, and I think that piece might be within Reggie Jones, who is a sophomore, had a really strong freshman year. If he can have that breakout sophomore campaign that I think he will have, they'll be right there in that mix for a conference title.
The other team I wanted to ask you about is Bowling Green. DiMaggio Wiggins is a really good big. He averaged 10 and 8 last year. He's 6'10", 240. I've also heard that they have a really good recruiting class. Is that a team that could possibly creep up on people?
Yeah, I think they're probably a year away just because they have 6 freshmen and only 1 senior who's a former walk-on. I actually have a funny story about DiMaggio Wiggins. After I was doing conference first teams on Twitter, I tweeted out all of them. I don't know if you remember. And he messaged me after, and he sent me something to the extent of, "Thanks for giving me all the motivation I need." And I was like, wow. But yeah, I mean, I had looked at him quite a bit for the role. 10 points and 8 rebounds a game, really talented kid. I think he'll have a great year. I think they're probably 1 year away, as I said. But yeah, I think Bowling Green, interesting club, and I'll be rooting for Mr. Wiggins because he stood up for what he believed in.
All right. So let's move on. So obviously we mentioned the Missouri Valley Conference a little earlier. It's definitely a conference that's taken a few hits the last few years. I mean, obviously they lost Creighton a few years ago in the Big East. Now they lose Wichita State. Any conference would have a tough time rebounding from that. They bring down Barista, who, don't get me wrong, he's a solid program, but I don't think a program like that is going to replace a Wichita State. I don't like the league much. I have to be honest. The future could be different, but right now, just not looking good to me. What's your outlook on Missouri Valley this year?
Yeah, it's tough. I think Missouri State has to win this league. They're just so talented compared to the rest of the conference. Alize Johnson's an NBA prospect for sure at 6'9", kind of does everything on the floor. They are going to be a team I'm watching intently tomorrow night, taking on Western Kentucky. Although Alize Johnson may not play due to an injury, which is very unfortunate. After them, though, there are questions. I think Loyola Chicago is a team that I think has a lot of talent. They bring in a really strong recruiting class. Porter Mosier's doing a very good job there. Northern Iowa is always a factor. It feels like they do lose Jeremy Morgan, but he was a bit of a ball stopper on offense. He did score a ton, but I think their offense may flow a little better now that he's gone. Not to say that it's a good thing to lose a guy like that. And they do bring in a freshman who I'm pretty high on in Taiwan Pickford from the Minnesota area. And then looking beyond them, I like Valpo. I think Valpo will be in the mix still. Tavon Walker, I think, is poised for a pretty huge year as a senior. And then Joe Burton and Bakari Evelyn are two high major transfers who could make some noise. But yeah, as you said, it's pretty wide open. I think there's some really interesting teams, and it might be one of those leagues again that it's not as good as some other leagues, but it's going to be super fun just because we don't know what's going to happen.
As much as I love Alize Johnson, I don't even think Missouri State is all that great of a team. I think they're the favorite in this conference, but it's not when I look at the roster and say, oh, wow, this team is going to just, blow doors.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think that's a loaded team by any means. And I'm going to be pretty frank. Paul Lusk isn't a very good coach. He's a pretty great recruiter, but he's not a very good in-game coach. They've had some disappointing seasons. This is kind of the year he has to win a conference. He has to win the conference this year. Honestly, I would consider firing him for anything less.
Okay, so we'll see how the Missouri Valley bounces back from losing their premier programs. So the NEC is up next, Kevin, and right off the bat, this is a team conference that's just been decimated by transfers. They've lost so much talent the last few years. With getting transfers snatched out of their grasp. What do you think about this league? This is another league that I think is kind of almost wide open. What do you think?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the transfers have just decimated it, and it makes it really tough to predict. I think the team that most, and I included, would consider the favorite is St. Francis of Pennsylvania, bringing back Malik Harmon, Isaiah Blackman, Keith Braxton. I think that's the team that has the most talent and is probably the clear favorite, in my opinion, although they do lose Josh Nebo, who does transfer to Texas A&M. A big rim protector and was a huge piece for them. 12 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks a game. So losing a guy like that is not easy by any means, especially in the NEC where bigs don't grow on trees. You can find guards in the prep school that'll come in and contribute right away, but you just generally don't find game ready bigs at the NEC level. So they're number one for me. After that, I think LIU Brooklyn has a chance to still be pretty good. They're an interesting team with their Kellogg as the new coach. Mount St. Mary's is a team that I think is always going to be there with Jamie and Christian, and then a really solid point guard and one of the funnest players to watch in college basketball in Junior Robinson. I think, after them, Sacred Heart I think looks pretty good. It's just a tough league to predict, Tony. I mean, there's so many teams that are going to have so many new, fresh faces in charge. It's just gonna be a tough one to call.
I think it tells you, how weak it is just by the fact that Mount St. Mary's, I think, lost how many players to transfer, and they're still probably a top 3 team, right?
Yep. Yeah, they lost Miles Simon and Elijah Long, Maudo Sala. They have 12 freshmen on the roster.
Wow.
Not 12. Yeah, 12 if you include the walk-ons. 12 freshmen.
That's incredible. So yeah, pretty much wide open league, and hopefully they can kind of build that up again with some solid recruiting and get some talent. Because again, the transfers just have kind of killed out the league. So all right, let's move on. We're going to talk about the Ohio Valley next. So the good thing is, I just want to get your opinion real quick. They're getting rid of the divisions. Are you happy about that?
Yeah, I'm very happy about that because I think divisions in college basketball is kind of stupid overall. I don't really see too much of a benefit. I mean, because you always wind up with unbalanced divisions. I think you're better off with having one whole division where you play everyone once and then a random amount of teams twice. Maybe you have like a certain rival in the conference you always play twice. But I've never been a supporter of divisions. I just think it creates more problems than it solves.
Yeah. In my opinion, this is kind of a 3-horse race with Belmont, Jacksonville State, and Murray State. I think it's a really top-heavy league. I think a lot of the teams in the middle, the bottom, have a lot of question marks. But those 3 teams at the top are really good. My money's on Murray State. I think Jonathan Stark is one of the better players in college basketball. You obviously can't bet against Rick Bird, and then Jacksonville State won the conference tournament last year. So, how do you think this shakes out in the OVC this year?
I mean, you pretty much hit on most of what I was going to say. I mean, Murray State has one of the better duos in all of college basketball, Jonathan Stark and then Terrell Miller, who averaged 16 and 8. I don't think anyone knows about him other than Ohio Valley fans. And then Byron Hawkins comes in as a Towson transfer. He's really good. Really talented recruiting class as well with Ja Morant, the headliner. I've heard really good things about Ja Morant. So I think they're my pick as well, although obviously Belmont deserves plenty of recognition given what they've done, although losing Evan Brads will be tough. I'll highlight a sleeper team, and that's Eastern Kentucky. EKU brings back 2 15-plus point-a-game scorers in Asante Gist. Didn't say Shivers, Asante Gist. I nearly said Shivers. And Nick Mayo, who averaged like 18 and 9 last year, just a super talented kid. And then they bring in, I'm blanking on the name here. Let me pull it up. I believe his name is Jackson Davis. Yes, Jackson Davis. He's a Butler transfer. And he didn't do a ton at Butler, but was a really talented recruit coming out. And I've heard really good things about what he's going to do there. Gives him a second big to play next to Mayo. I think that's such an underrated thing when you have a star big man, to have a guy next to him who can kind of rebound the ball, do some of the dirty work, commit that foul. I think that helps your defense because you can't let your star get in foul trouble. I think that helps your offensive flow because your big doesn't have to be down in the post, especially when you have a guy like Mayo who can stretch the floor. So I think that's a team I would have number 4, but I think that's a team that could surprise some people.
All right, but to me, again, it's kind of those top 3 and then everybody else. Do you think so?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a pretty significant divide unless EKU is even better than I think they'll be between that top 3 and then EKU being the best of the rest, if you will.
Yeah, I'm going with Murray State because as much as I love Rick Bird, I think this is the year to possibly take advantage because I think Belmont has one of their, not that it's a bad roster, but it's one of their weaker rosters in the last few years, especially with the loss of Brad. So that's why I think maybe Murray State can kind of creep up and win the conference this year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. They're a bit young. I think Austin Luke is a redshirt senior who's going to do a lot of things for them. I think the one guy that's going to have to step up is Dylan Windler. Kind of plays that combo 3-4 role. Shot a ton of threes last year, and he had a game where he had 10 threes in a game. A tremendous shooter, but can he kind of become an all-around player as like that third scorer next to Amonze Ejikezi and Austin Luke?
For sure. All right, so that should be an exciting year. I think, the fact that Murray State is back on track, it seems, will definitely make for a fun conference. So the Patriot League is next. We're going to talk about, Bucknell is really what we're going to talk about. The Bison have dominated this league. They've won 6 out of the last 7 league titles. They won 90 conference games in the last 7 years. I don't see much changing this season. They have a stacked roster that would shock me if they even run the table in the conference. Nathan Davis is kind of taken over, and he's kind of kept the wheels turning here. You think Bucknell runs like this?
I'm on record saying they're going to run the table in the Patriot League. I think they have such a nice trio. Nana Fowland has everything you want in the mid-major big man. Block shots, great defender, scores in the post, great footwork. And then Zach Thomas is such a perfect complement as a stretch 4, shoots the 3, great passer. They can do a lot of high-low looks. And then kind of the forgotten man, Stephen Brown, their starting point guard, over 11 points a game, shoots the 3 really proficiently, creates offense, and he was so tremendous against West Virginia in helping them break down the press in the NCAA tournament. So yeah, I mean, I'm a bit concerned about just like their overall depth, but I think that's a team that could really be one of the better mid-majors in the country overall this season.
Yeah. The other 2 teams I kind of marked out as possibly, challenging, but I don't think they will. Navy, I think, has a pretty good team this year. And also, I think maybe Boston University as well. What do you think about those 2 clubs?
Yeah, I think Navy's. I think I had Navy number 2 and Boston U number 3 in my rankings. Boston U's a team. They bring in a really talented freshman in Walter White, a 3-star kid, 6'6", super athletic. That's not the type of player you typically get at a Boston U. So I think he's going to be a big contributor from the start. Destin Barnes is a sophomore. He only played in a couple of games last year, but he had some really solid numbers as well. I think he'll be a potential breakout candidate, and they have a pretty solid senior core with some guys like Cedric Hankerson and Chetty Mosley. So I think they're a team. They probably have the second most talent in the conference. I wouldn't surprise me if we were going to say where's Bucknell go down, maybe at BU at some point this season. Yeah,
I would agree with that. All right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about the SoCon next. Very intriguing league. There's some really good teams that will be in the mix to the top. Now, probably last year's champ, Eastern Tennessee State, most likely might take a slight step back. They have a lot of newcomers, but still have some talent. For me, it's probably going to come down to maybe Furman or Samford. Mercer, I think, is really good as well. What do you think? How do you think it plays out with SoCon?
I'm really excited to watch the SoCon this year. I mean, just top to bottom, there's some interesting clubs. Samford has a dynamic offense. I'm actually hoping to get to one of their games. They're taking on Loyola Chicago pretty close by, so I'm hoping to get to see them in an early season good mid-major showdown. I think my pick is going to be Furman. Devin Sibley, coming off of Player of the Year season, just a tremendous guard, over 17 points a game, shot the 3 extremely well. Definitely a guy I'm excited about. Mercer has 5 senior starters. I mean, how many teams have 5 senior starters? And a guy like Ryan Holland who can create offense off the bounce. It's really useful down the stretch. And ETSU, as you mentioned, they probably do take a step back, but I think Steve Forbes is by far the best coach in the conference. And then they still have, they bring in some interesting pieces. They bring in Kanayo Obi-Rapu, who started his career at Longwood. They bring in a junior college player, a few pretty good junior college players as well in the front court. So I'm excited about ETSU. I think they'll be I think I'd have them 4th in the conference, but it wouldn't surprise me if they, won 18, 20 games and we're tough come March. So definitely a league I'm looking forward to, the SoCon.
Yeah, I think the depth is very good because, I think a team like UNC Greensboro could be solid as well. And also Wolford, Mercer, So there's a lot of competition in this league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 1 through 6 or 7 is a pretty strong league. The bottom still leaves a bit to be desired with the VMI and Western Carolina. I think they'll kind of anchor the league a little bit. And then Chattanooga, I think, was definitely looking at a down year this year. No. I think they made a good hire with Lamont Paris coming in from Wisconsin as an assistant, but it's just going to take time. They had a ton of seniors as it was, and they lost a really talented recruiting class that was shaping up under Matt McCall. They had 2 signees at guard in Terry Nolan and Jalen Crutcher. Crutcher's now at Dayton, might start at point guard, and Terry Nolan's going to have a significant role at George Washington. So, these were talented kids that they lost. If they're going to have any chance, they're going to need a huge year from McKindy London, the Xavier transfer, who showed some flashes last year, but definitely a guy who will have to kind of take the next step into stardom if they're going to have any chance of, being a top 5 team in the conference.
For sure. I'm with you on Furman as well. I think they should be the favorite heading into the season. They got a really talented core. So, all right, let's move on here. We have to talk about the Southland. So the big news last year was SF Austin. Is that how you say it?
No, it's SFA. We can't call them SF Austin.
SFA decided to take a year off and not win the conference tournament. So that was kind of surprising. The bad news is for the rest of the league, it looks like they're the favorite again. Kyle Keller's got a bunch of veterans on this team, really experienced club, some promising recruits coming in. I think they're the top dog again. I do think Abilene Christian might be in the mix, possibly Lamar, but SFA is back to being the class of the league. What do you think, Kevin?
I completely agree. I think remember the name Cameron Mack, freshman point guard coming in at Stephen F. Austin, who I've heard nothing but good things about in terms of coming in, probably starting a point guard from the start. Just a tremendous, super long and athletic, which will be great for them trying to run and press, which they're still going to do. He handles the ball extremely well, super athletic, and so I'm excited to see him as a freshman. I know it sounds crazy, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 3 point guard in the conference right away. This is a really talented kid. I think a sleeper for me is I think you mentioned Lamar. Lamar is my number 2 team. Southeastern Louisiana is a team that I think could make some real noise. Marlene Veal's kind of one of the more exciting players in the country. 5'8" and dunks. It's kind of fun to watch for sure. And then a guy in Jordan Capps, who sat out most of last year with an injury, but was off to a really promising start. Had dominated the 2 games he was in, averaging like 22 and 8. So that's a team that I think could make some noise for sure.
Absolutely. I still think Austin is the clear-cut favorite, though, if you had to ask me right now. But I certainly think, like I said, Christian and Lamar are still 2 pretty quality clubs. So it'll be interesting to see if SFA can take back the championship, because when Brad Underwood was there, they pretty much won it every year.
Oh yeah, for sure. What was his conference record in the 3 years before he left? I think it was like 53-1. It was something absolutely ridiculous, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the Summit. So we have a new look this season. Obviously IUPUI left for the Horizon League. So I think there's only 8 teams left in conference this year. But the good news is, there's some heavy hitters at the top. Obviously Mike Dom is a star. He'll have San Diego State in the mix. The team I really like is Denver. They're an up-and-coming program. I really like what Rodney Phillips has done there. He's done a really good job. North Dakota State is still strong. I think Fort Wayne has enough pieces to be in that mix as well. I think we might see one of the more competitive conference races at the mid-major level.
Yep, I definitely agree. I'm picking the Fighting Mike Doms, aka South Dakota State. I'm going to ask you this: what stat projection would be so far as to say you'd be surprised that Mike Dom did? What would be the number where you'd be like, okay, like points and rebounds, you'd be like, okay, that would be surprising to me?
I think he's going to average 30 and 10, and I'm not even being sarcastic.
I agree. Like, honestly, if you told me, like, I think the first number that I'd be like, okay, that is stunning, would be like 35 and 13. Anything below that, I would be like, okay, Like, I could see it. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm picking it. But I mean, the guy is just absolutely incredible. I mean, 6'9", super strong, shoots the three, does everything. I mean, he's going to be absolutely incredible for them this year. And then they bring in a point guard and Brandon Key as a junior college player, who I think is just a solution to so many problems for them. True distributor, shoots the three. Going to be exactly what they need. So perfect point guard for TJ Otzelberger's program.
Yeah, I don't think the roster is as good as last year, so I think that's why he's going to put up those numbers. I think 35 and 13 is a bit of a stretch, but I have no problem saying that he's going to average 30 and 10.
I think that's not a predict. 30 would be 30 and 10 or 30 and 11, but that was the first number I'd be surprised by, 35 and 13.
No, I think Denver is the best team in this conference. Am I crazy to think that?
I love Denver's roster. I mean, the job Rodney Billups did last year, as you mentioned, was tremendous, and they pretty much bring everybody back. Daniel Amigo is a tremendous center. Joe Rozga is very good. One transfer that they do lose, I think, that's getting overlooked a little bit is CJ Bobbitt, who's kind of a 10-point a game, 4-rebound type of wing. Who you miss those guys. I think they're certainly replaceable, but I think he was a solid piece for them. So they lose him. I think they were picked like 5th in the conference, and to me, I see them as a top 3 club.
Absolutely. I have them down as 4th in one of the magazines here, but I think it's a tough conference to pick because those top 4 teams are all really close. You know, San Diego State, South Dakota State, Denver, North Dakota State still has an excellent, backcourt, that duo of Miller and Jacobson. So I think it's going to be a fun race. And I know that a guy you like, John Conchar, talk about him for a second.
I was about to say, let me butt in and do a John Conchar love affair real quick. I mean, the guy is just tremendous. At 6'4", I mean, he rebounds the ball like a center, 9 rebounds, 10 rebounds a game, shoots the three, remarkably efficient. So I think he's one of the most fun college basketball players in the country, in terms of all that he does on the floor.
Absolutely. He's when we look at his numbers, I think people will be shocked at how good he was.
Yeah, I mean, his efficiency is just absolutely off the charts. I mean, he shot like 60% from the field while shooting like a high percentage in number of threes. It was like, I was floored. I knew he was good, but I looked at the numbers the other day. I was like, holy cow.
I know. Yeah, so and they beat Indiana last year, which was pretty cool. That was a great win for the program. So maybe they can creep up into that top 3, top 4 this year. We'll see. But so let's talk about the Sun Belt, Kevin. This might be the deepest mid-major conference in college basketball. Would you think you can make a case for that?
I think it's definitely a possibility. Obviously, UT Arlington comes in as pretty much the consensus favorite, with Kevin Hervey and Eric Neal, such a special duo. I think going down, though, I mean, you look at a team like Georgia State, who brings back DeMarcus Simmons, who is nothing short of spectacular. A freshman who is super highly touted coming in, and he lived up to the hype and even more even. And I think he's going to be, an 18-point a game type scorer for them this year. So they're a team that I like. Coastal Carolina has some interesting pieces as well. Georgia Southern has a deep backcourt. I mean, Louisiana Lafayette, I know that's a team you're very high on. I'm not quite as high, but I still think they're going to be a pretty good team, with 3 high major transfers coming in to complement Bryce Washington and Frank Bartley. So overall, just a really deep league. I think there's like 6 teams who, 6 or 7 teams that could win 20 games.
Now, Troy is the team that won the conference tournament last year. What do you think about their club? Did they bring enough back to maybe challenge in that top 4?
Yeah, I think they're getting kind of slept on a little bit. I mean, sure, they weren't like a top 3 team in the conference last year coming into the conference tournament. But I think Jordan Varnado is one of the better players in the mid-major level. I mean, he was a 16-8 guy last year. And he comes back. He was only a sophomore. They bring back some other interesting pieces as well. Wesley Person's a good guard. I don't think they have quite the power that a UT Arlington or a Georgia State would have. But overall, I'm pretty high on Troy overall.
Now, the thing with UT Arlington, don't get me wrong, I'm still picking them to win the league because Hervey and Neal are so darn good. But they lose a lot of production from last year's team. I mean, they have a lot of, question marks outside of those 2 guys, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I was really just concerned about with them And this was something that I was quelled a little bit by a preseason exhibition. Obviously, we try not to take away too much from a result, but just how they did it. They demolished Oklahoma, and they showed me in that game that they have the pieces around them to space the floor for Hervey and Neal, because they're just so good in some of the looks they run, especially in some pick and roll sets, pick and pop. They can do so many different things. And so if you have some guys who can space the floor, that's really key. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be really valuable for them this season.
Are you picking Arlington to win the conference?
I am, yeah. I think they're going to be pretty special. I think Neal gets kind of forgotten about just how good he is. He didn't have to score last year. I think his scoring numbers are going to explode this year because he had the other pieces around him, and this year he's going to score a little more, and he's still going to assist. It's going to be a fun team.
Any chance of an at-large bid?
Not having their schedule in front of me, let me just pull that up really quick.
Sure.
I don't remember it being like a super impressive schedule from like looking at it before. Let's see. Options for winning. They have at BYU, at Alabama, at Northern Iowa versus FGCU, and at Creighton would be their quality win chance games. So probably not, but I mean, I wouldn't rule it out.
All right. So let's move on to the SWAC. I mean, the SWAC is like the ACC of mid-major hoops. It's just a tremendous league.
I'm totally excited to break down the SWAC for at least half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, Texas Southern is probably the only team I'm aware of in that conference.
Yeah, I mean, Texas Southern's going to win the league again. DeMontre Jefferson was outstanding as a freshman last year. They bring in Dante Clark from UMass. I mean, Dante Clark scored 16 points a game at UMass as a sophomore. I mean, that's an unheard of level talent at the SWAC level. I think he's going to come in. He's immediately going to be the player of the year in the conference. So they're my pick. I don't think there's too much more to add there on the SWAC.
I'm kind of just to stay on the Dante Clark point real quick. I'm kind of still shaking my head on why he transferred to the SWAC.
So my understanding was there was never great chemistry or motor or desire at UMass, and I think it wasn't exactly appealing to him to go to a high major program and be a sixth man or a bench guy. So he was looking more at mid-majors, committed to Coastal Carolina. That fell through. Landed at Texas Southern, where one of the UMass staffers had been. So had headed to. So I think there was the connection there that wound him up landing at Texas Southern. And they've done a great job with the with that program and producing pros as seniors. So I mean, whether it's, Zach Lofton, who's now the player, I think Texas Southern, I was reading is that they've had like the last 5 conference players of the years in that conference. Like, that's crazy to me.
Wow.
5 straight years they've had the player of the year. So definitely an interesting team for sure.
Definitely. Just a terrible conference. So our final conference tonight, the WAC, is another conference I'm very excited about. Especially now, Grand Canyon is eligible for the NCAA tournament. Dan Marley has done a really, really good job, building this program. He has a team that can challenge for the top. It's going to be tough to knock off New Mexico State, even with a new coach. How do you think this plays out, Kevin? Because I'm leaning New Mexico State. I think Grand Canyon will be right on their heels, but I just think the Aggies have a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I go back and forth almost daily on this one. I think I like the roster slightly more at New Mexico State. I think we'll just see with the transition of a coach that may hurt them more in the non-conference than in league play. So yeah, I think I will lean New Mexico State. But Grand Canyon's going to be excellent as well. I mean, a team that brings back Josh Braun. I think his health is a huge concern. He's had some knee injuries throughout his career, and he has to be healthy for them. But then they also bring in Casey Benson. They bring in Damari Milstead. They bring in Robert Blumberg, who's gotten really good reviews. The Latvian big man, very talented, high major type prospect. So overall, I think those are the 2 teams to watch. And then Utah Valley is a team I think gets slept on a little bit. I think they're a true contender. Akola Manyang comes in from Oklahoma, blocked a ton of shots there. He'll have a bigger role. Isaac Nielsen, Kenneth Ogby. So I think they have some interesting players overall, and could make some noise in the WAC.
What do you think about this Grand Canyon program? Do you think it could maybe, be one of the premier major programs? Do you think it's a big enough school to do that, something like that?
I think the motivation is there from the athletic department to make it that. I think the money's there to make it that, and I think that's so important. And I think it could be down the line. The future of this Grand Canyon program, I think you know as much as I do. I think there's certainly a possibility they could move up in conference, whether that's the Missouri Valley or the Horizon League or the Big Sky or the WCC. I've been a long proponent of the WCC taking them on to make them more of a stronger conference for at-large bid potentially. I think the WCC will run into challenges accepting, like their member schools accepting a school with that for-profit label that Grand Canyon still holds. So that'll be a concern. But I mean, the future of that program is bright. That's all. I mean, I don't know where it'll be, but I know it's bright, and it's a super fun program. I know Barstool's doing like a season like documentary or something about them, a profile, which is really good. They've done a really good job publicizing their program. And I'm really excited for the future of Grand Canyon basketball.
The fan base is incredible.
Absolutely.
The home court advantage is tremendous. So, before we get out of here, let's jump into I forgot about the WCC here. Pretty much, again, a two-horse race. I think you know my feelings. I'm leaning St. Mary's. I just feel like Gonzaga, granted, I think they're an NCAA tournament team. I think they're going to be a very, very good team, but I just think they lose a little too much experience and talent from last year's roster. Are you leaning St. Mary's too?
Yeah, I'm leaning St. Mary's. I think Jock Landale is probably one of the best mid-major. I don't need the mid-major level. He's one of the best players in the country. I mean, just an absolutely dominant big man. Emmett Nahr, I think, has a bit to show me. He didn't have the best season last year. But overall, I think St. Mary's is the team. Gonzaga, obviously, they're still talented. Mark Few does a great job. They're going to go to the NCAA tournament. They're going to get talked about in the top 25 at some point this year. I don't think it's right to have them in their preseason. I know we've discussed this pretty much at length over the last few years. Not years. Good Lord, the last few months. It feels like years. College basketball's here, guys. I'm excited. Gonzaga, yeah, I think they're certainly talented, certainly an NCAA tournament team, but I don't think they're as good as St. Mary's this year. I think St. Mary's wins the conference, probably by a game, just because I don't think Gonzaga's going to go out lose to Pepperdine or any of those the middling teams in the conference. So I'm excited for that one. Certainly an interesting race.
Absolutely. I think the Gales are going to be in a little bit of trouble though because the non-conference schedule is so bad yet. So we'll see how that affects their tournament seed and all that. But very, very good team, very independent. One of the more undervalued coaches in college basketball. Well, Kevin, we haven't even playing time. It's 8:59.
Perfect.
So now we get to go draft our fantasy basketball team.
Absolutely. I will be sharing my roster on Twitter with all of you. I'm sure Tony will be as well. It should be a fun one. You guys can kind of follow along as we duke it out with all this college basketball Twitter community we formed. So looking forward to that.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody listening tonight. Kevin, thank you for joining. This was our last preview of the podcast. So we will be back every Sunday night to do a weekly recap. I'll have another a guest on every week, so it should be a lot of fun. Also, again, check out Kevin on Twitter at CBB_Central. I'll obviously check out his website as well, CBBCentral.com. Follows Mid-Major Hoops. He's the encyclopedia, as I said, and he needs to put that on Twitter, as I said. So a lot of good stuff from Kevin, a lot of good stuff tonight in the podcast. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It was a blast.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later. We'll talk to you next Sunday. Have a good night.